Hi everybody, I'm Don Dickson. I want to thank you for joining me again today for another episode of our structure fishing workshop. The last couple of times we got together, we were talking about sharper breaks. I gave an example that caused some commotion out there in viewer land. And we spent the last time we were together, we spent clearing that up, or hopefully clearing it up for you, as to how we arrived at that spot and how important a sharper break can be for you in your fishing. But as we are in the middle of this study on breaks and break lines, these additional signposts that the fish use on their movement and migration on structure, there's been some additional confusion that I thought I'd take one more short video here today to clear that up and once and for all be in a position where we can just move forward and understand that fish just don't swim about haphazardly in a lake. They follow well-defined features, and we classify those features as structure, breaks, and break lines. Now, the last time we talked, I talked about Buck Perry, the scientist, and defined a true scientist as somebody that spends a lifetime, not just a couple of weeks, but a lifetime studying one particular subject. And I mean 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for a lifetime. That's what Buck Perry did. So when he makes a statement to me, it's based on not only his knowledge and his brilliance and so on and so forth, but it's based on his experience. And fishing 325 days a year for nearly 70 years, he's got a lot of experience that most of us will never even come close to matching. So when he says something, I just accepted it. I mean, I was like a child in school. Professor tells you one thing, you accept it, and you move on. You don't try to argue it. You don't try to disprove it. You just accept it because of the source, and you move on. And that's what I did. And it not only took me from not catching, hardly ever catching fish, to catching fish all the time, catching so many fish, they ended up fishing for a living and earned a full-time living at it for 35 years. Made all the difference in the world. But I never questioned one thing. I never questioned any one thing that man ever told me. I accepted it. I put it up here in the memory bank, never forgot it, and moved on. And I can tell you in my 48 years of experience, I've never found one thing that he ever said it wasn't true. And I've been able to establish through my experience everything that he did tell me was true. So, when I have some people writing in, sending me emails that are questioning maybe something that I said in a video, or maybe they misunderstood it, or they read it but they misunderstood what it was they read, I want to clarify things for you. I want you catching fish. And the minute you start thinking, well, maybe Buck Perry didn't have that right, let me tell you, you're going down the wrong road. You're going down the wrong road, my friend. So I'm going to deal with a couple of things today to try to make this point to you once and for all. And then after that, we're going to move in and start back into our regular study. All right. I received a question through email, but I had a comment. I think this one was a comment about Lake Winnebago in Wisconsin. I'm familiar with it. Know a few people that fish it on a regular basis. And the best way to describe Winnebago is it's just a big old mud puddle. It's huge. And I think it's the largest inland lake in Wisconsin, but it's huge. But it's pretty shallow. So I heard you say that fish are stupid creatures, never had an original idea in their life. They can't rationalize things like human beings. They're just creatures of habit. But one thing we know they won't do, they will not cross a flat. Well, someone took umbrage to that statement and said, well, that's just not true. Because we catching fish in these flats in Lake Winnebago all the time, out in these mud flats, And the way the comment was brought about, it made it seem like these fish in Lake Winnebago are just sort of out there hopelessly lost in the wilderness, just swimming around, without any plan, without any idea of where they are or where they're going or what they're doing. They're just sort of out there in the middle of nowhere, swimming around in these big old wide old mud flats. Okay. Now, I hope I've set the stage properly for you. But isn't it amazing? Now, think about this. The fellows that I know that are fishing Lake Winnebago, they're catching fish in the same exact spots every year. Now, I'm trying to picture all of these crazy fish swimming around out there in the flats, but they always arrive back at the exact same spot every year. How do they do that? Luck? They just happen to be in the same old mud flat this year where they were last year. Come on, folks. I need you to, at least use some common sense here. If they're arriving at the same spots every year, that means they're following something. They're not just swimming about haphazardly. Period. Now, why is this so important? It's important because we're trying to identify the importance of structure, breaks, and break lines, how fish follow these features when they're moving about in a lake, any lake, all lakes, and how we can meet up with the fish by fishing these features on a regular basis. Now, I'm going to throw a navionics picture up of Lake Winnebago. For those of you who don't know this lake, take a look at it. Looks like the ocean. If you change some depths in there, you can call it Lake Erie. You can call it Lake Michigan. It's a big old shallow flat lake. In order to make my point about this particular lake, and once again, as I stated last time we talked, I don't like to use any one situation because most everybody that's in the viewing audience of this video is not fishing Lake Winnebago. So I don't want to spend a bunch of time on one lake or another lake. Just like I said last time we talked about Palm de Terre. I don't want to talk about that all the time, but we were identifying the importance of a sharper break. So I try to tell the overall educational story, and then you apply it to your lake or to your river or to your reservoir. You take what parts of that affect you in your fishing. So I don't want to talk about the lake, but again, I want to make a point about structure, breaks, and break lines. So this is a good opportunity to do that. At the same time, answer some questions that some people might have. Now, I want to go to, I mentioned not too long ago, I mentioned in passing, I talked about the most fantastic bass lake I ever fished. I found a fish on a 6-inch break line. And I talked about the reason I was able to find that is because of the lake types and the geographical location in Florida. I am always looking for 1-foot break lines because in most all cases in Florida, that's your key to finding a fish, period. Almost every lake, 1-foot break lines. That's what we have because we have shallow saucer type lakes in Florida. So I'm looking for 1 foot. So when I found the definite 6-inch break line, I could identify it. Now, I'm going to show you a navionics picture of this entire area where I found all these fish to be the best bass lake I ever fished. When I first took buck there, the first day we caught 3 over 10 pounds, and we had a stringer that weighed 100 pounds. 100 pounds of fish on one limit of fish. When I showed him where I was catching the fish, he kind of smiled like, yeah, I trained you well. But this was even a little bit strange for him. It wasn't a foot break line, it was a 6-inch break line. Now, if you look at this map right here, you see these contour lines, 11 feet, and then for quite a distance, then it's 12 feet, and then for quite a distance, and it's 13 feet. There's no break line shown anywhere. This is navionics now. That's what we're looking at. You don't see anything there. Let me tell you why that is. Because this contour map is not in 6-inch intervals. That's why you don't see anything. Because if it was, you'd see two lines come real close together and run for a distance. That would be a 6-inch break line, which exists. It's there, but it doesn't show it on the map. Remember the last time we talked about pomme de terre? It doesn't look like it, but you got to do a detail to arrive at these spots. Now let me tell you what happened when I found these fish and found this situation. Keeping in mind now, I never doubted Buck Perry when he said when fish move on structure, they pause and eventually stop at a break or a break line on structure. In Florida, we know we have a lot of slots, deep water slots. We have fishing one-sided bars. We're fishing break lines all the time. So I'm looking for a 1-foot break line. I don't see any in this lake. Nor do you. You're looking right at the map. It's not there. So I had to do some detail. It bothered me. I had 15 or 16 feet of water out here in the center. Knew I had deep water fish. But I started out at that 15 feet heading towards the bank. And I'd go for about 50 yards. And all of a sudden, I'd be in about 14 and a half feet of water. Never saw any break at all. Go another 50 yards, and then I'd be in 14 feet. Then I'd go another 75 yards, and I'd be in 13 and a half feet. Never saw anything. It was so incrementally getting shallower that I couldn't see anything. And keep in mind now, I'm looking for a 1-foot break line, which is in almost all Florida lakes. So I go all the way in to about 7-8 feet of water. I don't see anything. So I turn around, I'm going back out. And I'm going really slow, watching my meter. And when I got to 9 feet, it's 9 feet, it's 9 feet, it's 9 feet. You don't ever see the needle changing. And then all of a sudden, you're in 9.5 feet of water. So I know it's like breaking at an inch at a time. You know, it's flat. So I'm going at 9.5 feet, 9.5 feet, and all of a sudden I see 10. But it happened quickly. Not over 50 yards. It happened quickly. 9.5, 10 on my needle. It's in between 9 and 10 feet, and all of a sudden it's 10. I mean, right now. It broke 6 inches. When I first saw it, I couldn't believe it. So I turned around and went back in again, and I'm staring at that thing, 10 feet, 10 feet, 10 feet, 10 feet, 10 feet, 10 feet. I'm staring at it, going really slow, 10 feet, 10 feet, 9.5. Oh! It broke. It literally broke 6 inches. I turned around and went back off of it again to establish it for sure. That's how it was breaking. Then I thought, I wonder if it's breaking 6 inches out in the deeper stuff. So as I went out, 11.5, 11.5, 11.5, 11.5, 11.5, 12, 12, 12, 12, 12, 12. Broke again, 11.5. I couldn't believe it. Turn around, come back in, 12, 12, 12, 12, 11.5. Boom, threw a marker. Kept on going. 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 9.5. Boom, threw a marker. I had 2 break lines, both of which were breaking at 6 inches. Right in this area on this map that you're looking at, you don't see it, do you? Nor did I. But I knew I had my fish out here. I had my deep water slot. I knew I had fish. I had to identify when those fish become active and move, which way they're going to go. I had to find that spot. I found it. 6-inch break line. Now, let's go back for a minute to Lake Winnebago, the guy that sent me that comment about how fish do cross flats, because he's really got proof his fish is Lake Winnebago. Do you suppose that guy was looking for a 6-inch break line? No, he wasn't. Was he even looking for a 1-foot break line? I'm sure he wasn't. Just from the nature of his comments, he wasn't looking for that. But you see, even the most minute features, fish can see them well, and they follow them. And most of the time, we're not looking for it. If you don't know what you're looking for, how are you going to recognize it when you come across it? You're not going to. You have to know what you're looking for. If I'm fishing that big old mud flat Winnebago out there, I'm looking for some small features. Just like in a Florida lake, I'm looking for 6-inch break lines. I'm looking for 1-foot break lines. When I'm on the reef out in Lake Erie, 4 miles out, see it breaking 2 feet. Man, that's like a mountain to the fish. Because of lake type, geographical location, type of lake that you're fishing, you should know what you're looking for. And then when you come across it, you'll recognize it. And then you can map it and interpret it and then go about your fishing and start catching fish. But you're never going to find something by saying, well, maybe Buck Perry didn't have that right. Yes, he did. Fish are stupid creatures. They will not swim out over a flat. They're following something. The only question is, are you good enough to see it? In many cases, most fishermen aren't, because they hadn't put in a study. They haven't interpreted their lake type. They haven't studied all of Buck's material. They just aren't good enough to locate what the fish are following. But I can promise you one thing, they're following something. And we haven't even got into the invisible break lines yet. Current break lines, temperature break lines, thermoclines. Hard spot, mucky spot, mud bottom, clean bottom. We haven't even got into those break lines. Those are what we call the invisible break lines. But I need each and every one of you to never forget, like Buck told me, Donnie, don't ever forget this. When fish move in a lake, in a river, in a reservoir, they have to have something to follow or they won't go. And these things, these features that fish follow are structure, breaks, and break lines. Do they always look like that Stevie Wonder could identify? No, they don't. Sometimes they're only 6 inches. Sometimes it's a mucky bottom versus a hard bottom. It's an invisible break line. It's a temperature break line. It's a current break line. Fish following along it. But you can't see it. But trust me, when fish move, they're following something. It's our job, through our general mapping and interpretation and our expertise at detail mapping and interpretation, to establish these features. Find them, recognize them, map them, interpret them, and then fish them. That's our job. And if you get good at that, no matter where you go fishing, you're going to be successful. You're going to catch more fish than anybody else on that lake. So, I had to get that off my chest before I explode. So keep in mind, my only goal is to help you catch more and bigger fish. So in the words of my grandson, who I saw yesterday, he reminded me how important this was. He said, "Pap, do me a favor. Stay cool." So everybody out there, stay cool. And I hope I didn't attack anybody unjustly today. I'm just trying to straighten it out so you get the idea. Structure, breaks, and break lines is where we're going to meet up with the fish. So till the next time, be sure to follow us on Instagram, like us on Facebook, and be sure to subscribe to our channel if you haven't already done it. We appreciate you, and we'll see you the next time.